Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Welcome in Jesus' name. Glad you can be here tonight and join us. The last words of that song is what we want to hear about tonight. So we're really excited to have Jim here with us tonight. Before we get started, I want to make just a few announcements. This picture is actually one I snapped from right up here on the hill, and it was painted as we put the garden together. There's a little prayer garden back there. Many of you have been there, a place where you can go and spend time with the Lord. And near the end of the prayer journey, there's a little chapel, and we call it the House of the Lord because the theme is on Psalm 23. And there's actually, as we were putting this together, somebody found a picture that looked something like this, had a vision for this, and there was an artist actually came in and painted that picture for us. And so we're very thankful for that. And as we were putting the meeting together tonight, we thought, well, wouldn't that be something we just get that up on here and play that song that also there's little recording plays up there in the house. So anyway, welcome to my right. Out that door is where the restrooms are. If you need to use them, feel free. And just shortly, we're going to turn the time over to Mel Weaver is going to introduce our guest for tonight. But before we do that, let's just all, if you can conveniently do so, I'm going to ask you to stand. If not, just stay seated. That's fine. And we're going to have an opening prayer. Let's do that.
Hey, Ben, you'll just discuss the banquet with Beth, and we just have too many.
Father in heaven, we have met tonight in Jesus' name. We're thankful that Jim has come here to us and to share his experiences. But at the end of the day, what we really want is the name of Jesus to be lifted up. And Jesus, you said that if you're lifted up, you will draw all men to you. And tonight we pray that you would draw our hearts to you. That together as we listen to these experiences that Jim wants to share with us, that at the end of the day we would have a longing for heaven and to go be with you, which the scriptures say is far better. And that it would affect our lives in such a way that we would live with the stamp of heaven on our life. Father, would you come among us by your Holy Spirit tonight? Touch each of us. We ask you to anoint and touch the speakers. But we also ask, Lord, that you would touch our hearts and give us the ability to hear whatever you're trying to say to us tonight. And we ask all these things in that wonderful name of Jesus. Amen. You can be seated. Brother Mel?
Thank you, Merle. It's an honor to be here in the presence of the Lord. The Bible tells us that when we're gathered together in His name, He is in our midst. And we're going to experience His presence. I'm honored to have my dad, Luke Weaver, 92 years old, with me here tonight. And we are thankful that he's been part of this community for many, many years. And he's still around at 92. And so we give God the praise for that. Jesus said in John 14, "Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also." And we are going to experience something tonight with this testimony of Jim Woodward that is going to open up our eyes in a new way. My brother, Luke Weaver Jr., up in Canada, started this journey over 4 years ago with our brother Jim, and it has been a delight to journey with him as he has been developing his testimony that he didn't know what to do or how to do it. But we're here tonight to experience a little bit about what heaven looks like. At this time, we want to ask Jim Woodford to come and just share his story about Jesus taking him to heaven. Give him a hand.
Am I live? Can you hear me? Oh, wonderful. Well, good evening. Thank you so much for coming out, I had no idea we were going to have a group this large, but thank you, Merle. And of course, so I'm just thrilled to be here. Of course, winter is coming in Canada, so I'm thrilled to be anywhere. But I am indeed thrilled to be here. And I'd be remiss if I didn't take an opportunity to thank John and Sally Lapp for hosting us. It was about a year ago that I had the pleasure, and Pastor Mel, he said, "You have to see this prayer garden." And I came, and you know, when you go through the veil of death and come back like I have, you sense things. And we tonight are on holy ground. God will be here with us tonight. I know that it's the age of cynicism and skepticism, and this story sounds phenomenal, and it is. I'm not a pastor. How I wish I was. I'm not a preacher. I'm really not. I'm not an evangelist. I'm certainly not. What I am is a traveler, and for some reason known only to God, I was chosen to make this journey, and I was the most undeserving man to be chosen. I spent my life as an airline captain. I have over 30,000 hours of flying jets all over the world. I've been in 57 countries, and I'm a very technical person. And so to me, anyone that believed in God needed a crutch, and how wrong I was. This event happened in my life just a little over 4 years ago, April of 2014. I went through this experience, and it has profoundly changed me. And I believe with all my heart that in these end times, God is reaching out and choosing the most unlikely of candidates to bring his message forward. You have no idea how much I envy you. You truly don't. Because you have believed all your lives what I had to die to find out. That Jesus is real and heaven is real. And I got the rarest of glimpses of what awaits you for your faithfulness. And as I said, it's a world of cynicism. And some people say, "Oh yeah, you're just another guy trying to sell books." Listen, I had no idea I was going to write a book. But so many people wanted to hear the story. I'm 70 years old. And I hope to die every day. Because you see, I know what I'm going to. I miss it every day. And so even if I traveled every day for the next 20 years, I couldn't reach as many people as this book has reached. And all the proceeds that come in from this book go to further God's kingdom. We take a little bit of expense money, but the rest of it goes through an organization here in Pennsylvania that were kind enough to sort of adopt me, called Partnership for Revival. And so we help missions. We help the poor. And through your donations and through the sale of this book. So this is not about me making money on a book. This is about me trying to, for those of you that already believe, I'm telling you nothing new. For those of you that doubt it, I'm telling you it's real. And for those of you that want to believe, tonight is the night that I pray that Jesus will touch your heart. In this world, it is sad how we have walked away from God. And that's why I am so, and I'm not saying this just because I'm here in Pennsylvania. I love Pennsylvania. And how can I prove it to you? I've put my house up for sale in Canada. I'm moving here. But here's why. Here's why. Not only are the people lovely and the food great, but there's something I sense in Pennsylvania that I don't sense anywhere else in the United States or Canada or South America or Mid-America. There's something, I've come back with this feeling, something huge is about to happen. It's coming. It's coming. And I sense that it's going to break in two places. Over Israel and over Pennsylvania. And I don't want to miss the party. For those of you who believe, for those of you who have been faithful to God, there is nothing to fear. For those who have scorned God, as I did, beware. What awaits you is horrific. And I'm going to show you a glimpse tonight of that. Because not only did I see heaven, I was given a glimpse of what could happen if I had gone the other way. So before I get into the story, and I'll try to be as quick as I can, but bear with me if you will. And so as we indicated, I'm Canadian. And give you a little background, I was born in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. Anyone been there? Boy, you're lucky. Just kidding. It's a wonderful spot, but it's a little remote, and it's very, very cold. And long winters and short summers. Winter or summer in Newfoundland is on a Wednesday, 2 to 4. But it's a lot of snow, and I grew up in it. And you know that you got too much snow when you have to jack up the cow to milk it. But it was my home, and I loved it. Now, one of the other reasons I love being around the Amish is the horses that are such an important part of your culture. And because I've owned horses since I was a kid. And the reason I show this is horses have a lot to do with this story. And you're going to be amazed what I'm going to tell you about horses in heaven. But my so in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, as I said, I'm 70. I was born in 1948. And my grandfather logged with horses. And so, you know, I grew up around horses. And between the cold weather and shoveling manure, there was no shortage of hockey pucks with frozen manure. But it was wonderful, and I met my wife on horseback, so horses, and wherever I've lived in the world, I've had horses, and so horses play an important part in this story. Now, in the far north where I grew up, frequently how you got around, especially in the wintertime and the summertime as well, of course, was float planes that landed on the water or on skis in the wintertime. And my dad died when I was 2 years old, but my mom and my brother and I, my mom was 22 when she was widowed. And she, so we lived with my paternal grandparents right on the Exploits River. And I would be there as a young boy, and I'd watch the planes coming in and leaving, and I eventually, at 9 years old, started working down there, running errands and sweeping out airplanes and loading baggage for the float planes that were going farther north. So slowly but surely, I was falling in love with aviation and with flying. And I think I need my glasses on, yeah. So I never dreamt, because we were very poor, I never dreamt, but the wonderful thing about living that far back in the woods, you know, you don't know you're poor, because everyone was poor. But the little town I lived in was so far back in the woods, we had to come out to hunt. No self-respecting animal would go that far back in the woods. And in the winter, we had to pipe in daylight. But I eventually got my mom, bless her heart, on the secretary's salary, arranged for a loan for me to go to flying school. I never, ever dreamt I would be able to go. And she managed to send me, and I'm proud to say that in 13 months I paid her back. And 3 years later, bought her own house. So, but eventually I got through flying school, and up in the top right here you'll see this is an Otter aircraft that I used to fly, and I flew Beaver, and I had a real love for the old-fashioned aircraft. So I've flown a lot of ex-World War II aircraft and stuff that you should never take up in the sky. By the way, if you're ever flying and you're worried about crashing, always sit in the rear of the airplane, because you never hear of a plane backing into the ground. Little tip for you. But I went from single engine up to, I spent quite a few years as a water bomber pilot. And so that's a picture of the actual aircraft that I used to fly, and water bombing fires. So we would land on the lakes and pick up water and then head to the fire. And I'll just take a second to tell you a funny story, because you're not going to hear this every day, but this actually happened. I'm not the only guy it happened to, but I'm one of them. So what we do is we're fighting the fire, and we have a bird dog aircraft that's circling the fire, a smaller one, and he's telling me what direction the wind is and where the firefighters are on the ground. So I would fly back in. I have a co-pilot, and we would go down and skim the top of the lakes and pick up water, and then over to the fire and barrel down onto the fire. And because of the heat rising off the fire, Merle, what would happen is you'd have to power the aircraft down through, because it wanted to rise from the heat coming off the fire. So I'd have my hand on the throttles. The co-pilot would have his hand on mine in case I let go. And the aircraft would be vibrating like this, and you couldn't read the instruments on the dash. They were going like this. I'm not kidding. And every now and then you'd hear ping, ping, ping. It was the rivets popping and going around inside the cockpit with us. Because this was a 1938 PBY Catalina that the U.S. Air Force used to use to pick up pilots that went down in the ocean in the Pacific. And we had put a hopper in it so we could carry water. So anyway, this day we were fighting this massive fire. It was 1975, and the whole island of Newfoundland was on fire. It had been a dry summer. And so we were going, all day long to try and control the fire. And so they said, Captain Woodford, we need you over here. We've got some firefighters trapped on Mountain 2. And so I looked at the map, and I said, we're close. I have to refill. We'll be there as fast as we can. So I went in, and I'm skimming the lake, and Gander Lake has 3 tributaries, 3 rivers. And guess what? It was salmon season. So and the way the wind was coming, I had to go by the tributary, the mouth of the river that emptied in. So I get down and we're skimming the water, and as we're going along, we hear thump, 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 thump. Well, what's happening is we're picking up salmon. They're mooching a ride. And the co-pilot said, "What's that?" I said, "Fish." And so, but here's the funny part. So yank it off, turn over, head for the fire, barrel down on the fire, and I get a call, and they said, the smoke jumpers are caught. There's a ring of fire around them. They're right at the top of the mountain. You need to lay that right in so that you will swamp a path down the side of this mountain. They're in real danger. So I got to the fire, and now imagine this. Smoke billowing up, you can barely see anything, smoke and cinders and flying up past the aircraft, and we're barreling down, and it's vibrating like crazy, and we're getting down, and the co-pilot, I think I heard him pray, but I never prayed, so we're barreling down, and the wind blew it away, and I could see them, and they were waving their shovels at me, so I barreled right down, and the next thing I know, I could sense I hit a tree, and that's how low we were. And then I whipped it up on its wingtip and pulled release, and we swamped a path right down, and as I turned around in a 360, I stared down, and there they were running down the mountain. We had cut a path for them. So we were quite happy, so I went on and fought for the rest of the afternoon. I go back and I land about 6 o'clock, and we're tired and smoky. And when I land, I see an ambulance at the hangar, because this time we landed at the airport. And there's an ambulance there. And we taxied in, and I shut down the engines, and I pulled back the window and said, chock the wheels. And the guy yelled up at me, and he said, "You almost killed the guy, did you know that?" I said, "What?" So I got out of the aircraft, and he said, "Go over and see him. He's in that ambulance." So I go over and I open the door and I go in, and there's a guy with this big bandage over his head. And I said, "What happened?" He said, "I'm shoveling away, and all of a sudden a 25-pound salmon go whack!" He said, "It broke my jaw." And I said, "I am so sorry. I had no idea." He said, "Captain Woodford, I'm never eating fish again." True story. Anyway, that's not what I came to talk about, but I thought you'd enjoy understanding where I came from. Because you see, as a pilot, and I don't mean to sound dramatic, but I came up through the bush. And so there were some close calls, but I managed to get by it. And eventually I got enough time. I went to Vero Beach, Florida, got my jet rating, and then I was offered a job by a friend of mine in England. So I've lived in Europe for quite a bit. And to give you a sense, the pictures on the top are Dubai Airport. And today, Dubai is probably the most modern city in the world. And when I flew in there used to be a thing pasted on the front of the dash of the aircraft, Merle, and it said, "Captain, watch for camels on runway." And so I've been, as I said, North Africa. I did a lot of charter work. I enjoyed that more than passenger work. And the pictures down below are of Timbuktu Airport. Anyone been there? Timbuktu. It's right up the road from Timbuktu. And I put this picture up, as I said, not to be dramatic, but I realize now, in the clear light of hindsight, that even back then, God had his hand on my life. And I'm sure all of you have sensed God's hand on your life a time or two. And so I did a lot of crop dusting. This is the old TBM Avenger that I used to fly, the torpedo bomber from World War II, because we could spray tobacco with that. And so I did a number of things, but these close calls. But all these things I managed to survive, and it was building up an arrogance in me. And my nickname was Diamond Jim. No matter what I did, I survived it. I invested in companies early, and I became quite well off. And so I seemed to lead a charmed life. I mean, I was living the quintessential American-Canadian dream, a great career, good money, a wonderful family. But I realize now that what I attributed to my own abilities was God. And even when I did my 60-second parachute jump, just for fun, my chute came out and tangled. I pulled my emergency chute, and it tangled in the first one. And I come down in just 5 times as fast as I could, and I struck the only huge, big, soft pine tree in a 6-acre field. Man, am I good. Never once did I say, "Thank you, God, bless you, Jesus," or "Thanks for the favor." I thought it was me, and how wrong I was. So I had an arrogance, and I'm afraid that many pilots are guilty of that. You spend your lifetime delivering 500,000 people safely to their families, you develop an arrogance. And I remember on stormy nights, when the lightning was around us and I'd be at 35,000 feet, and sitting behind me, completely dependent on me, would be 200 or 250 SOBs, just completely depending on me. And by the way, that's souls on board. What were you thinking? That's souls on board. The manifest of the aircraft reads souls on board. Reason for that? Sometimes we're carrying 3 coffins, bodies home for burial. And if the airplane crashes and they count 203, where do the extra 3 passengers come from? So it reads souls on board. But so I was arrogant. Now, as I said, I used to think that people that went to church needed God as a crutch. But I was completely wrong, because this arrogance that I had inside of me was and I think if we're not careful, in not just as pilots, but any career in life, if you're successful or even if you're just making a good living, you end up being arrogant if you're not careful. A little problem here, Merle. There we go. But God gave me my first angel when I met Lorraine. I was blessed to meet this wonderful lady. I'd been single for a long time. And if I tell you how we met, you'll think I'm making it up. But we met on horseback on a frozen lake in Canada, January 22nd. And I was riding my horse, and the ice was frozen, and they do a lot of ice fishing there. And so there were trucks and cars out on the ice, and I was riding my horse on the ice with special shoes on it so it wouldn't slip, corks. And I saw another beautiful Arabian horse, and it rode over to me, and it was Lorraine. And about 6 months later, I met her again at a horse show, and found out she was single, and I was absolutely in love. I was just absolutely in love. And I'd just taken a job back in Canada as a charter pilot on a jet, and so, I was away a lot, but she's been a blessing. I'll tell you something very quickly, and sometimes she travels with me, but she still works as a nurse, as an RN. But she retires next year, and we're praying that she can join us on this ministry, because if you read the book, chapter 10 is Lorraine's story, the view from this side of heaven. And I had nothing to do with that. I never even saw it, Merle, till the book was published, and she did a beautiful job. But I didn't know it. And when I first met Lorraine, she told me her religion and God was important to her. And I think I might have mumbled something about going to church, and I did a few times, but it meant nothing to me. But Lorraine was always very devout. She sent our children to Christian school. Of course, I was away flying. But she is just a real godly woman and a true blessing. And so it's wonderful that she came into my life. Merle, I need instructions on this. There we go. So I said horses are an important part of our life, and that's Lorraine with her horse, Honey Rose. Honey Rose. Oh, okay. Am I aiming at this or at the back? Oh, okay. It's come along, Merle. So as I indicated, I was living a pretty charmed life, and life was good. So I retired from flying about 10 years ago, and but I still had my own twin-engined aircraft. I had a Cessna 310 capable of going nonstop to Florida. And I woke up one morning. It was a Sunday morning. We were down at our cottage, and Lorraine had gone to church. Of course, I was out in the boat. And but I woke up, and have you ever laid on your arm or your leg and you wake up and it's numb and kind of feels tingly? Well, I woke up that Sunday morning and both arms and both legs felt like that. And I remember thinking, what position did I sleep in last night? And as you know what I'm talking about, don't you? and Lorraine came home, and I'd come in off the boat, and she said, "You don't look well." And I said, "Boy, I don't feel well." And I mean, I'd been blessed with good health all my life, and as a captain, you're given a 2-day medical every 6 months to make sure that you're fit to fly. So, and I'd never taken anything stronger than an aspirin, never needed it. And so she said, "Well, I think you should go see the doctor." And I said, I'll be okay. Well, 2 days later, I'm really sick. So I went into the doctor, and he looked at me, and he said, "I think you've got the flu. Just go home and sleep it off." So away I go. 3 days pass, and now I can't hold any food down. I'm unable to swallow. I go back in and see him. "Oh, well, it's just the flu. Go home." 2 days later, I'm staggering. And I go in, and now he's angry with me because I've come back again. And so I went out to the parking lot and collapsed. Now they pay attention. And so they brought me in and called the ambulance, sent me to the hospital, and really didn't know what was wrong with me. And so, of course, they started the procedure of poking and prodding me. And a number of specialists came to see me. And what is it about doctors that, there's a curtain around your bed and they're on the other side and they think you can't hear? What's with that? They're doctors. And I can hear this, "Boy, this doesn't look good. Yeah, he's not responding at all. This is serious." I'm laying there, getting more paralyzed by the minute. "Hey, doctor, that's a curtain, not a wall." So, anyway, but even then, and then my hands started to curl inward, and my legs started to curl up. And so finally they said, "Well, the best neurologist in the whole province will be here tomorrow, and we'll have him examine you." Now, what they didn't know, and what I didn't know, was I was coming down with a rare disease that had a 7-day window to stop, and I was in the 12th day. And so the doctor showed up the next day, the neurologist, and he examined me, and he came back in and again stood on the other side of the curtain saying, "This is really bad." Now, I'd been in Africa the month before, so I thought maybe they thought I'd picked up a parasite. But in fact, what they didn't know and what I didn't know was I had contracted a disease. It's not rare, but it's not common. I'd contracted a disease called Guillain-Barré. Anyone here know what I'm talking about? Yeah. It's interesting. It's more prevalent now than it was 10 years ago, especially since the Zika virus in Brazil. A lot of the kids that had the Zika virus have come down with Guillain-Barré. Any nurses or medical people in the, yeah. And Juanita? Yeah. So I was contracting Guillain-Barré. And they said, "We thought it was MS, but you don't show the markers for MS, but we're going to do a spinal tap, and this will confirm our diagnosis." And so they came at me with a needle about that long and did a spinal tap, and the doctor said, "I'm going to take this over to the lab myself. I'll know in an hour." He was back in half an hour, and I'll never forget this. He stood over the bed, and he said to me, he said, "Mr. Woodford, this is bad news." He said, "You have contracted Guillain-Barré. The typical treatment is plasmapheresis and autoimmunoglobulin therapy, administered no later than the 7th day, and we are now in the 15th day." He said, "This could kill you." Even then, in my arrogance, I did not say, "God, if you exist, if you're there, would you help me?" Not me. This is one more thing that I can overcome. I can beat this. I can do anything. I'm Diamond Jim. And then the full onslaught of the disease. And I went literally overnight from a guy that flew jets, rode horseback, downhill skied, water skied, raced Jaguar cars, to someone that couldn't even care for himself and was entirely dependent upon the nurses and my wife for my care. And so I went through a really desperate time. If you know anyone that's gone through Guillain-Barré, sometimes it's mild, sometimes it's bad, and then there's the case that I had. But here's what's amazing. The paralysis comes up your lungs, eventually comes up to your lungs, and you can't breathe, and then you die in the really worst cases. So anyway, they said, we're going to try something different. How many of you here remember the polio scare back in the 50s? Remember polio? Remember the iron lung? He said, we're going to try something. He said, we're going to give you the plasmapheresis, and we're going to give you massive doses of it. We're going to exchange your blood about 17 times. And then we're going to give you autoimmunoglobulin therapy, and then we're going to put you in an iron lung to try and arrest this disease. He said, we don't know if it's going to work. So down in the basement, they had one. They dusted that off, plugged it in, and it worked. Dragged me down there and shoved me in and depressurized it. And boy, I'll never forget that. It was like every rib in my body was cracking, you know. But I got through it and went through a really horrific time of not being able to eat or speak. But I got through it. It took months. But eventually I was released and went home. So this was about 6 years ago, or 4 years ago. So anyway, I went home, I was in a wheelchair, I had a trach, and I went to physiotherapy, and I had to learn to walk all over again. And when I walked, I dragged my right leg. You know, I had no muscle tone in my right leg. But eventually I got through that, you know, and but the after effect of that was terrible pain. What happens when you have Guillain-Barré is it's as though it destroys the myelin sheath on your brainstem. And it's similar to, Merle, cutting off the rubber from an extension cord and exposing the raw nerves. And every signal from my brain to my body was one of pain. Oh, look, I'll tell you something. Not nuisance pain, not inconvenient pain, but screaming out in the middle of the night pain. I used to keep a leather belt by my bed so I wouldn't wake Lorraine, and I would bite on that to keep from screaming. I went from perfect health to screaming in the night. And how I would start my day was I had no muscles, so I'd fall out of bed, crawl to the shower, take a handful of medication, and turn the water on as hot as I could till I could move my body, get dressed while laying on the floor, and then slide down the stairs. But I was determined to walk again, and I would every chance I would get, but I had this terrible pain. When I got well enough to travel, I went to England, I went to the Mayo Clinic here, I went to every specialist to see if there was a cure for this terrible disease that had affected me, and there wasn't. But one day, I met a pain specialist in Canada from Australia, and for the very first time, I was prescribed pain medication. Now, what's sweeping your nation and mine right now? Opioid addiction. And much of it starts with a prescription medication. So my heart really goes out to someone that has a family member that has gone through this, because I fell into that same trap. If I was supposed to take three times a day, one 3 times a day, I found that the next week I would need 2 3 times a day. And so that's how it just steamrolls to get the same relief that I had before. And it was getting bad. And of course, as I told you, Lorraine's a nurse, but I got really, I thought, smart. I had medication hidden all over the place. And I would go to the pharmacy and say to my doctor and say, I'm going away for a month, I need an extra prescription. And that's what I was doing. And you know, people say to me, well, Jim, didn't you know what you were doing? Listen, when pain has control of your life, that's all you think about is, how can I live a normal life again? And that's what I was trying to do. I mean, I came up through the 70s, I never smoked marijuana, I never took any kind of a recreational drug. I loved my flying career, I never drank. If I needed to get high, I got in my own jet and went up to 30,000 feet. Never needed it, but suddenly I needed this to kill the pain. So in April of 2014, I remember I had one of those days where I dragged myself downstairs, and I got a phone call. And of course, I couldn't run my businesses. I'd sold them off, and I was selling off a lot of stuff. I had a piece of property for sale, farmland. And I got a call from the survey company, and they said, "We've surveyed the land. We've asked you 3 times to go see if the markers are in the right place. We need you to do it so we can send you a bill." So although I knew I had this medication in me and I was feeling awful, I didn't have to go on any highway. I got to it through the back roads on my property. And so I wasn't endangering anyone. And I remember that day as though it was 5 minutes ago. And I pulled up and put the truck in park. And I didn't plan it this way, but I was facing the setting sun. And I remember sitting there thinking, oh, I just can't get out of this truck. I'm in so much pain today, and the medication isn't helping at all. I don't know why, but now it's not helping. And so I thought, but I've got to do it. They need it. So I moved my gloves, and hidden in the compartment where I kept my gloves was a vial of medication. And I thought, well, I've already taken more than I should, but maybe if I just take a few more, I'll have the energy to walk around this field. So I sat there and I started to take the medication. There was a bottle of pop. And here's where it gets really, really interesting or scary. I sat back waiting for that nice, soft, warm feeling of relief. But suddenly, it was as though my feet had caught on fire. And I remember actually looking down at the floor of the truck to see why was the floor so hot. And of course it was within me. And then my fingertips started to burn. And that fire came rapidly up my body and inboard from my fingertips toward my chest. And all of a sudden, I knew in my heart that I had done something truly catastrophic, that I had reached a point of no return. And as my lungs started to seize, it was as though the cab of the truck was filling with water, and I was trying to keep my head above it to get a breath. You know, I tell people, you know when you're dying. And I'll tell you this, dying is easy. Living is hard. And as I struggled to take my last breath, from somewhere inside of me that I had never been before, I cried out. I raised my hand to the setting sun, and I remember it was shaking violently as my body convulsed into death. God, forgive me. Me who had never prayed in his entire life. But I had this feeling from someplace inside of me that I needed to apologize to my Creator for having wasted this beautiful life that he had gifted me with. God, forgive me. And with that, my head fell forward. I remember smacking my head on the steering wheel, and I was gone. I'm not sure in minutes or time how long, but I remember sitting back up, and I knew time had passed. Because, Steve, I could look out at the horizon, and the sun was setting right on the horizon. And then I realized something incredible. I had no pain. The pain was gone. I finally got it right. You have to take the whole bottle. I thought, as usual, I had fixed myself. But the pain that had plagued me for every waking moment of my life for over 4 years was gone. And I felt so wonderful. Not only that, I felt like I was your age. Young and alive, more alive than I'd been in years. And I couldn't believe it. I slide out of the truck. I walk about 15 feet away. I mean, it's a spring evening in April. I can hear the birds in the trees. I can smell the grass. And I feel wonderful. It is as though I've taken off a heavy, wet overcoat. And I'm as light as a bird. And I'm thrilled. And then I look down, and it's as though I can see through my feet. It's as though I can see through my feet. And by the way, little tip for you. If you're going to die in a truck, die in a Dodge Ram. Lots of leg room, reclining seats. I don't think Chrysler will ever use that ad, but that was my truck. A green Dodge Ram. But suddenly, I look back at the truck. Sorry, I got ahead of myself here. Yeah. I look back at the truck, and I'm outraged because someone is sitting in my truck. Not only that, he's sleeping on the steering wheel. And so I turn to go over there and give him a good, what for? Hey, sweetie. A good what for. And have you ever had a dream where you're trying to walk and it's as though your feet are frozen in place? That's what it was like. I could only move inches at a time. But I got close enough to look up in the truck once again. And I can't begin to describe to you the feeling that went through me when I realized that the body in the truck is mine. And I know it's me because my head is on the steering wheel and it's turned toward me and there's blood gushing from my mouth. And I stood there stupefied because I couldn't relate what was going on. How can I be here and my body is there? But you see, I can fix this. And I thought right away, if I just get back in my body, everything will be okay. But the more I struggled to get to my body, the harder it was to move. And then suddenly I began to rise. And I'm rising in the air. Now I'm an ex-pilot. I'm a good judge of altitude. And suddenly I'm 100 feet over the truck and I'm floating backwards and up. I can look down and see my toolkit in the back of the truck. I can look through the rear window and see my body. And I am absolutely terrified. I get up to about between 12 and 1,500 feet. I can look out and see the countryside. And I'm absolutely terrified. Oh, darn. And when I look up in the sky, this beautiful golden circle appeared. And how many of you heard of the tunnel of light? I mean, I'd heard of it, but I'd never paid any attention to it. But listen, this is a good chance that this is what you will see. And as I'm rising toward it, the front of it opened with this golden light, and suddenly my body canted backwards at about a 45-degree angle, and it was as though I was flying one of my jets, and I'd rammed all the throttles forward, and I went zipping into that tunnel of light at an incredible speed. I used to say at the speed of light. Now I say, Mel, at the speed of God's light. And I'm terrified. Terrified. Because typically, if you're flying or you're driving in your truck with the window down or you're in a boat with a motor on it, you can feel the buffet of the wind against you. You can hear the sound of the wind rushing by you. Absolute silence, but going at tremendous speed through this massive tunnel of light. And sometimes I feel as though I traversed eons of distance. And yet, in a very brief time, I became aware of a light even brighter than the tunnel at the end. And suddenly I began to decelerate. I come up to the end of this beautiful light, and I realize I'm facing, I still don't know whether to call it an entrance or an exit. It's covered in mist, absolute silence. But I sense the tunnel closing behind me, and I have no choice but to step forward. And as you would, stepping someplace unfamiliar, I put my foot out through that mist. I can't see anything. I put my foot out through the mist, and I felt, and I could feel something solid. And so I put my foot down, then I brought my other foot out, and I can't believe it. I'm standing on the most incredibly beautiful green grass you could ever imagine. Green grass. I now know where the saying comes from. The grass is always greener on the other side. They're talking about heaven. And I look up, and it's as though there's a dividing line in front of my face. There's this beautiful vista on the right, an incredibly beautiful sky. It was as though the sky was mixed with a sunrise and a sunset at the same time. A sunrise and a sunset at the same time. And yet I couldn't see a sun. But there was a line drawn in front of my vision. And on this beautiful, on the right side, it was this beautiful light. And flowers of all kinds. I mean, I've been to Africa a number of times, South America. Flowers, not just flowers that were familiar, but flowers I didn't even know. And color of every kind that you can imagine. But to the left, that beautiful green grass went from green to brown to scorched to black, and then dropped off in a deep crevasse or canyon. And I'm very technical, and I was as terrified as I was. I couldn't understand how can there be that dramatic a difference. And so I slowly crept over toward this hole and looked down. And when I did, the walls of this crevasse were like coal. They were black and shiny like anthracite. And I was intrigued by it. And I stared down, and then I heard something really strange. It was as though someone was trying to open two massive iron doors on hinges that had not been oiled in a long time, and the doors were screeching and creaking as they were forced open. And then more light came through those doors, a red light like a distant campfire. And suddenly, when those doors opened, out of those doors, there was an odor, a smell that came up out of that pit, an odor of death and decay, of things that should never see the light of day. And I remember retching at the smell of the rot and the decay. And then, to my absolute amazement, I look, and something's coming through the doors. And it's massive in size. It is massive in size. And it kind of shuffled through these massive doors. And as I look, its body, first I thought it was a body of smoke. But I realized it was more than that. It was more solid, but the body itself was on fire. And this creature turned, seemed to be sniffing the ground, and then it peered up at me. And I will never, as long as I live, forget what I saw. You know, and kids, please don't get scared. But you need to know, the world needs to know, there's a consequence to not loving God. We speak of heaven. There is a hell. And it is not some made-up place, not some made-up place, not some made-up place, not some made-up place, not some made-up place. help me. Me, who should have expected nothing. Me, who had turned his life away from God for 65 years. I'm crying out, God, help me. And that's the story tonight. It is never too late to cry out to God. Never too late. No matter what you've done, no matter what you've been through, God is listening. You can't fake it. You can't make it up. He knows your heart because he made your heart. But he gave you free will. It is your decision. It is your decision. And in my desperation, I'm crying out at the last second of being taken to hell. And suddenly, as I concentrate on that brilliant light, the instant those words left my mouth, 3 beautiful stars appeared in the mist, coming rapidly toward me. And I concentrated on it and tried to ignore my name being called. And I believe with all my heart, Papa Luke, that had I turned around and looked at that creature, I would have been taken. But I chose to concentrate on the light coming toward me. And suddenly I realized they were taking a form. Now, I may not have been religious, but I knew what an angel looked like. Everyone's gotten a Christmas card with an angel on it. And I look and they're starting to take form. And I remember thinking, Merle, are these angels? And yes, they were. God had heard the cry at the last nanosecond of a man who deserved nothing and sent a rescue party. 3 of his heavenly angels. And I watch in amazement as they come rapidly in toward me. And my pilot instincts took over. I was afraid they're making too fast a landing. But they made a beautiful landing. And the amazing thing was, as they came toward me, there was a beautiful light that came before them. And I remember that light washing over me, and I turned in time to see that light strike that creature. And when it did, it shrieked and screamed and scrambled back down that hole like a rat running for cover. Darkness and evil cannot exist in the light of God. You know this. You know this. You have the light of God in you. It is up to you to make it shine, to be a beacon to all around you, to your family, to your friends, to strangers. The light of God is within you. And the light of God washed over me. And with the creature gone, they came in real close to me. And angels are big. Kids, this is the good part. Angels are big, tall, but beautiful. They had this magnificent face that was neither male nor female. I think they're the best of all of us. I didn't see, and their wings were like spires of golden light coming up out of their shoulder blades. And I thought at first that they were blonde, but I realized, no, they had silver hair, but the reflection from one wing to the other created this golden haze over their white hair. And I think that's where we get the idea of a halo. It's the actual reflection of the gold of their wings on their silver hair. And it looked as though someone had figured out how to spin sunlight into cloth. Because their robes, as they glided toward me, they didn't walk, they glided over the ground. Their robes looked like spun sunlight. And yet it rippled as their robes moved. It was like watching moonlight on a lake at night. It was stunningly beautiful. And but the amazing thing that I will never forget were their eyes. Angel eyes. Angels have the most stunningly beautiful violet eyes. Not gray, not green, not purple, but violet eyes. And so imagine, the first one coming toward me is about 10 feet tall. The second one is 13 feet tall. And coming behind is one about 15 feet tall. Now that's as tall. John, I think your ceilings are probably close to that, right? 15 feet tall with violet eyes. And he is dressed for battle. He has on armor, he has a sword, and he has a breastplate and a disc beneath his neck, shaped like a crescent moon, and there's lettering on that. And I've since found this out, but the lettering is alive, it's moving, and it looked like Hebrew. And I'm just stunned that this magnificent creature. So the first one comes right up to me, and I'm looking up at him, and I'm not very tall, and he's 10 feet tall. I found out later that the first one that came toward me was my guardian angel. Now that poor angel had pulled an awful tour of duty, because he or she had a look of relief on her face that was obvious. He comes right up to me and smiling at me, and all of a sudden I feel his arm or her arm come around my shoulder, and he hugged me. And then suddenly I'm conscious of this massive wing unfolding and coming out around his arm and pulling me in tight to his body. And there I am, snuggled up to an angel. Oh, how do I describe it? It was like if you put your finger in an electric socket, but it felt good. As they say back in Newfoundland, it hurts me nice. And so those eyes are just the most incredible things. So as I've been traveling around telling people about being hugged by an angel, people say to me, well, what's it like to be hugged by an angel? And I spent a lot of time thinking about this. The closest thing I could come to this is being hugged by an angel of God. It's like being hugged by 50 grandmothers at once, with a smell of tapioca. I smelled tapioca. Now, I'm not from the Church of the Holy Tapioca, but let me tell you what a merciful, wonderful, kind God you serve. With all that God has to think about, He remembered that when I was a little boy, beating my way home through a blizzard on July 2nd, my grandmother would dust the snow off, put me in front of the warm stove, and give me a big warm bowl of tapioca. You see, a magnificent God, with all He has to think about, remembered that I love tapioca. And I think that He knows what a huge transition it is for us to go through this. So you are His child, and He wants you to remember something that you loved as a child. And so for some of you, it might be the smell of your mom's cooking. It might be the smell of your dad's woodshed. It might be the smell of the farm that you grew up on. But I think it is magnificent that the Almighty God knew that I liked tapioca. And that's another reason I'm moving here, because the best tapioca I've ever had is here, which explains this. But it was just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful feeling of love and warmth. And then the second angel, or the first angel, started to take his wing away. And I reached over and put my hand on his arm, or her arm, and I thought, oh my goodness, I shouldn't have done that. And when I pulled my hand away, the light in the angel's body clung to my hand till I got it up about 10 inches, and then it left me and went back into its body. And I'm here to tell you something you don't hear every day. The love of God is sticky. God's love is sticky. It wants to cling to you. It wants to be part of your life. And so he smiled at me, but before he let me go, he looked at me, and suddenly I heard the angel's voice. His or her lips did not move, and it wasn't telepathy. It was more, Merle, like thought. I call it thought transition. It was as though he was in my mind and I was in his. And I heard him say to me, the angel said to me, "Fear not, James, for we are your constant friends." And now if you get an email or a letter or a note from me, I sign everything, "You're a constant friend." Because that meant so much to me to know that the angels are our constant friend. And then the tall angel came forward, the warrior angel, and he bowed to me. And here's something amazing. I thought they were being polite because he bowed so low. Not so. This is something you've never heard before. The angel bowed to me as they will bow to all of you, because angels are in awe of us. Angels are in awe of you. Why? Because they look at you and you and you and you and all of you, and they see the light of their master in you. The light of God is within you. They see the light of God in you. God created you in his image. It's not the facial image. It's the image of his light. And it's up to you with your free will to make that light grow and expand and be a blessing to all you encounter. The angels bow to you. They are in awe of you. And then I heard the tall angel speak, and his voice was deeper, and he said, "James, would you walk with us?" And he straightened up, and he brought his hand back like this, and a path opened up through that beautiful green grass, and I turned, and with an angel on either side of me, the tall angel behind, I began my walk through paradise. Ladies and gentlemen, how can I possibly describe to you in an hour what I saw? And the words do not exist in the English language. They simply do not exist. But ladies, I got to tell you something. If you love flowers, heaven is the place for you. Because everywhere you look, there is color of flowers, and flowers that are huge in size. Some are just like we have on earth. But here's an amazing thing. In heaven, color has sound, and sound has color. Now think about that for a minute. Color has sound, and sound has color. I was just stunned by the beauty of everything. And as we walked along, I realized my vision had changed, and I had 360-degree vision. I could see ahead of me, behind me, without turning my head. And it was telephotic as well. And I could look off at these distant mountains in heaven and concentrate and see the petals on a flower on the mountains of heaven. And people say, well, that sounds hard to do. It was no more difficult than texting and watching the news. You know, it was easy. But the flowers on the path we were on looked like they were made out of stained glass. And I remember turning to the angel and saying, "They're so beautiful." And he said, "Look." And he knelt down on the ground, and I knelt beside him, and I noticed that when we knelt down, light rippled out where our body touched the ground. Light rippled out. And he reached down and held a flower up, and I realized why I thought they were looking like stained glass, because they were transparent and diaphanous. So when I looked through a red flower, I could see the leaf, the flower beneath it, and the flower beneath that, and so all their colors combined to create another color. And if we have 500 shades of red on earth, they have 50,000 in heaven. I mean, it's a feast for the eyes. And I'm just absolutely stunned by the beauty of it. I remember as I'm leaning over the flowers, this beautiful smell came up from the flowers. And it was incredibly beautiful. And I remember putting my face down to get one more big breath of this. And when I did, I heard something in the flowers. Remember I said color has sound and sound has color? And as I have my face down in these flowers, and the angel is smiling because he or she knows that I'm really enjoying this, but I thought I heard something. At first it was the tinkling of small bells, but then I realized it had a melody. And I turned to the angel and I said, "Is that music I hear?" And what he said made me cry. He said, "Yes, James. The flowers are so happy you're in heaven, they're singing to you. The flowers in heaven will sing to you." And then as I watched in amazement, color has sound and sound has color. The sound came up and changed to like a pink mist and drifted off toward a bright light on the horizon. And they explained to me that that melody will end up in the throne room as praise to God. a gentle mist, a pink mist. And I'm just stunned. We continue to walk along. They're pointing out things, and I'm asking questions. I'm very technical. I have 7 journals of memories of heaven. So this little book we have here tonight doesn't have near as much in it because we wanted to keep the cost of the book down. But I'll be writing a couple of more. So anyway, we're walking along. We come up to a split rail fence, like you'd see on any farm here in Pennsylvania or anywhere throughout America or Canada. And I look, and there are 3 magnificent horses. And the guardian holds up, and they call themselves guardians. I never heard them refer to themselves as angels. Held up his hand, and he made a motion like this. The horses' heads came up, and they came trotting over the grass. And as they trotted toward me, kids, light came up from their feet as they trotted across the green grass of heaven. Came right up to the gate, and I'm just in awe. Horses in heaven. I don't know who God's got taking care of them, but they're doing a fine job, John. They're just beautiful. And the really good news was I saw no manure. Because I've shoveled my share of manure. But this magnificent white one came right up to the gate. Now, of course, I'd never studied the Bible, but of course you know that when Jesus comes back, he'll be riding a white horse, right? And I remember putting my hand through the fence to stroke this beautiful horse, and my hand went right into its body. And just as had happened with the angel, when I withdrew my hand, the light of the horse's body clung to my hand, just like it did with the angel, the sticky love of God. And so I'm standing there looking around thinking, this is magnificent. If only I'd known, I would have come sooner. But then I look up in the sky of heaven. Now, we've all looked up at the sky on a summer's day and seen the contrails of jets going over, which is the water and the fuel condensing in the cold atmosphere at 30,000 feet. I've left a lot of them in the sky. But as I looked, it didn't make sense. I mean, I know American Airlines flies to a lot of places, but I don't think they fly to heaven. So I turned to the guardian and I said, what are those? And what he said made me cry. He said, those, James, are the prayers of your family for your soul. The prayers of your family for your soul. And I didn't know it, of course, until I got back. But I found out when I got back and got well that when the police, I was missing overnight, they found my body by triangulating my cell phone and found the truck. The police came to the door and informed my wife that I had been found, and although I was in the hospital, it appeared that I was deceased. Although I was in the ambulance, it appeared I was deceased. And so my wife has 5 sisters, and 4 of them, who live close by, gathered in the kitchen with my brother-in-law David, who I always thought was nuts because he was religious, gathered in a prayer circle and prayed a prayer. And the prayer that David prayed was that if it be the will of Jesus, send Jim back. So you see those 6 words I keep talking about and the prayers of my family. And the guardian went on to tell me something interesting. He said, James, he said, sadly, mankind is losing the will to pray. And prayer is so important. You know, when they showed me the Hall of Records, they record every single prayer that you utter. Every single prayer. It is precious to them. You know, in days gone by, not that long ago, and I'm happy to know that it's still here in the Amish community, and for those that truly love God, that there's still a prayer time in the evening, that you still honor God, because prayer matters. And we live in a society now of instantaneous gratification. People go to church, they pray for something on a Sunday, doesn't happen by Tuesday. God doesn't exist, He's not listening. That's not how prayer works. You want to see prayer work? Pray for someone else. Pray for someone else. But look, we're all human. And you know, when you're afflicted with a disease or you have something really bad that's happened in your life, remember that there's a reason that you don't understand on earth why you have this. But you must understand that sometimes the affliction that you have, God is using you as an inspiration for others. They watch you go through what you're going through, and you have no idea. You will never know the ripple effect of how you bravely managed that disease and how you inspired other people. It's amazing. And so I was so grateful to see my family pray for me. And suddenly my hand was taken by another angel, who I found out later was a scribe. He was recording everything. And all of a sudden we're lifted up in the air. And I'm looking down from a great height, and I thought I was looking at a reflecting pool. But suddenly it split open and moved back, and I realized I am looking down on nothing other than heaven. God's home, the holy city, the holy city. Now, people say to me, did you see your family? Because as I told you, my father died when I was very young, and my grandparents are gone. And what they explained, because I asked about that, and they said, James, there are 2 veils that you must pass through. I had passed through the first veil and come back. There is a second veil right in front of the gate of heaven. And once you go through that, you see your family. And I was not I didn't put my foot in heaven, but with my expanded vision, I was given a view of this holy city. If you can imagine the immensity of heaven. Now, I have to ask you to do something. You need to suspend for a moment everything you've ever been taught about spatial references, gravity, distance, and time. Imagine a place where time, past, present, and future is all collapsed into one, where distance doesn't matter, where spatial references doesn't matter. It's very, very, I think Einstein understood it. I experienced it, and I have difficulty explaining it. But it is different. It exists, but it's different. And so we're just, and then they start showing me things. And I'm looking at these magnificent buildings. And yes, by the way, the streets are paved with gold. But it's a muted gold. It's not real, it's not shiny, it's beautiful. It's almost transparent. It's gold with the impurities removed, which makes sense. But massive boulevards with greenery and these golden streets and these beautiful buildings, the halls of knowledge, the halls of learning, the halls of records, the halls of healing. And I said, but this is heaven. There is no disease. There is no pain. Why do you have a halls of healing? And he said, James, many times souls on earth, as you did, come to us suddenly. And it's very traumatic for them. And so this is a hall of healing where they're brought in and it's gently explained to them what has happened to them and how much God has loved them. And at the last moment you ask for forgiveness, and now you're with us. And so we help them heal the trauma of suicide or some disease that they've suffered with and not understood why they had this particular calamity happen to them. And I think it speaks once again to the mercy of God that, they had this hall of healing. And I'll hurry it up because you've been sitting here a long time. But there's something I must tell you. There was one building, and imagine these buildings. Now, these aren't buildings, they're massive in size. They're kind of a Roman Greco look to them, but they're not hewn from stone. It's like they were made from blocks of light. So they had this softness about them. But there was one building over to the left that was more magnificent than all the others. And not only that, in front of it was this huge green area. And on that green grass were thousands and thousands of kids playing with dogs and cats and birds and deer and other animals. And I was amazed. And I turned to the guardian and I said, "What's that building?" And he said, "That, James, is the nursery." And I said, Nursery? In heaven? And he looked at me with those violet eyes, and he said, yes, James. This is where the souls of aborted children come to when they are refused life by their earthly mother. That light is precious to God. It never dies. And we bring it back, and this little soul is allowed to grow in this area. And I was just stunned. And it's not, they went on to say, it's not just the aborted children, but children who have died in their innocence, or through miscarriage, or of disease, or in childbirth. God gathers those beautiful little souls, and they're raised there. And I'm just amazed. And I said to the guardian, I said, well, are they like children on earth? He looked at me and said, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And he said, of course, they're not growing an earthly body. They're growing a spiritual body. And so they age differently than they do on earth. And I said, what do you mean? He said, it is a factor in your reckoning of 3. And I said, what do you mean? He said, a 1-year-old on earth is 3 in heaven. A 2-year-old on earth is 6. A 3-year-old is 9. It's a factor of 3 multiplication. And so when they reach a period in their, they're free to join the rest of their family in heaven. And many of them choose, he told me, to remain in the nursery and care for the others. Because sadly, the abortion rate in both our nations is awful. This is wrong. Absolutely wrong. But God knows what's right, and that light never goes out. And so those lights are preserved. And so I'm just amazed at the goodness of God. And so to hurry it up a little bit, I'm looking down, and there's millions of people, millions, and yet no one is crowded because spatial references. Now, they're beings of light. They're beings of light. And as I look down, and with my telephoto vision, I'm looking right at, and I had the strangest feeling that I knew everyone, and everyone knew me. And because there are brothers and sisters, and they had a visage, they had a face, they had hands, feet, but they had a body of light, a silver light. And I'm looking, and I'm seeing something, but I'm not quite understanding what I'm seeing. And finally it occurred to me, and I turned to the guardian and I said, am I seeing this correctly? Because it appears to me that the majority of the people I see, with a few exceptions, appear to all be in their early 30s. And he turned with those beautiful violet eyes and looked down at me and he said, James, you are correct. No one is any older than 33, the age Jesus was when he died for mankind. So I don't know about you, but I'm looking forward to being 33 again. 33 again. But doesn't that make sense? God so loved the sacrifice of his Son that he decreed that no one in heaven would be any older than Jesus was when he was crucified. Now, I'm not a theologian. I know that some people have difficulty with this. It doesn't say it in the Bible, and I understand that. But here's my argument. The little bit that I saw, if you tried to put that into a book, a Bible would be about 12 stories high, just on what I saw. So do we understand or know everything? No, we don't. But the Bible is a wonderful glimpse into what God wants from us. It's a blueprint for your life. So I'm just thrilled to look down at all these happy people. And I mean, I'm looking down at these people, and some of them are going into the halls of knowledge, the halls of music, but no one seemed to be trudging off to work. Everyone seemed to have a sense of they're doing something worthwhile, And with a smile on their face. And every now and then you'd see a group with their arms all around each other. And you could tell that this was a family who had gone ahead, grandparents and parents, and now their son or daughter has arrived, and they're walking them through, just as if you took a visitor to Washington and said, that's the Lincoln Monument, and there's the White House. They were showing them the sights of heaven. It was stunningly beautiful. And I'm just overwhelmed by it. But and then suddenly we came back down, and I realized I hadn't seen the tall angel in a while. And this is a really important part of the story as I close the story, because this is really important. As we came down, and I could see, you see the white horse over here in the corner? And I hated to leave it. But as we came down to the ground, or of heaven, I realized that I hadn't seen the tall angel in a while. And I looked for him, and I turned around and looked, and I had not noticed before, but there was a slight rise, only about 30 feet away, that went up a gentle slope. And I looked, and as magnificent as the angels were, there was the tall angel was there. He was bowed very low, and for the first time I saw another figure facing the angel. And this figure was even more magnificent than the angels. And it appeared like there was a golden light that flowed up out of him down the sides and the front, and it behaved like slow-moving water, but it was golden. And I watched in amazement as this light flowed off him and started to flow down this slope toward me. And so I slowly made my way over, transfixed by this beautiful figure. And as I looked, this beautiful golden light flowed down. And I noticed wherever it touched a flower that was already beautiful and already in bloom, when that golden liquid light touched the flower, it bloomed even higher and more beautiful, the light of Christ. And as it came down and pooled around my feet, suddenly I was filled with the knowledge that I was looking at none other than Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Someone who I had never believed in. And here I am looking at Jesus Christ, the Son of God. And as I watched, the angel reached into his cloak and pulled out this little slim book and opened it and bowed for Jesus to read. And instantly, I'm filled with shame and remorse because I realize Jesus is about to read the book of my life. The book of my life. And all it was this little slim book, no bigger than a roadside diner menu. And I was ashamed. I should have lived a life that would have filled a book as thick as a Bible with all the money and all the resources I had, and I wasted it on myself. I should have fed the hungry, clothed the poor, helped the sick, just what Jesus did, and instead I spent it on myself, and I was ashamed. As Charles Dickens said in his wonderful novel, Scrooge, mankind should have been my business. Mankind. And I lived a life of pure greed. And I watched in amazement. We've all heard the saying, my life flashed before my eyes. That's what happened. It looked like all these pictures were coming out and going around me. And I saw myself as a young boy. I saw my whole life in an instant, and I was ashamed. But then suddenly Jesus looked up at me, and I turned and looked into his face. And when I looked into those eyes of gray and green and blue, I saw sadness for the way I had lived my life. I saw sadness for the way mankind has neglected his Father's message. But most of all, I saw unremitting love for me. For me. And mixed in with that love was forgiveness for all the life of badness that I had lived. I don't know if any of you have seen this picture before. This was painted by an 8-year-old girl who herself had a death experience. As far as I am concerned, ladies and gentlemen, this is the face you will see. This is the face of Jesus Christ. Now, I never paid any attention much to, but I've been to a lot of museums, and of course Christ is usually shown with long hair. But in fact, Jewish scholars have told me that long hair was not not a common thing with the Jewish people. It was considered vain. And so as you can see, his hair is quite short. But this is the painting by the young girl Akiane, who painted it when she was 8 years old. And I've spoken with Akiane's father, and he said, I'm the 10th person that has said they had a death experience, and this is the face they saw. I had never seen this face before. And so when I saw it for the first time, I was overjoyed, because I had spent months trying to explain to my wife this magnificent face of Jesus Christ. The kindness, the majesty, the love that he had for me. And this is Akiane. This is the little girl. Girls, pay attention. This is the little girl here that painted that picture. God speaks to us many times through our children because they are in the age of their innocence and they see things that we don't. I was so overwhelmed with the love that he had for me, I tried to get closer to him. So I was on my knees crying. And, when they were reading the book of my life, here's the strange thing. Never once did I feel I was being judged. Really, Steve, I didn't feel I was being judged. They didn't have to. I judged myself, and I was found wanting. But all I heard was, as the angel straightened up and put the book back in his cloak, he turned to me and he said to me, James, what did you do with the life my master gave you? I had no answer. And I pray with all my heart, I know you're good people, that when you face Jesus and they ask you that question, you can have an answer that will glorify him, because I had no answer. But I am determined to live my life every day and do all the good that I can, so that if I get a chance to go back again, and Jesus opens the book of my life to read it this time, he's going to need 3 angels and a forklift to open the book. There's an image, an angel on a forklift. But I'm determined, to try and live a good life. And that's why the money we raise for missions and for the poor, it's to help people, to physically help them. But Jesus, I struggled to get closer to him. And he raised his hand. And when he did, his sleeve fell back. And the radiance of his body shone through the hole in his wrist. And when I saw that, I began to cry even more, because I realized it was the remains of the crucifixion. And when I saw that, folks, I felt as though I had held the hammer and driven the nails. God sent his only Son to teach us how to live, and we murdered him in the most hideous way possible. The mercy and generosity of God is unbelievable. But for us who are believers, for you who have devoted your lives to him, you are absolutely what he wants. He needs you. We never think of God as needing us, but he does. God needs your love. He needs your devotion. He needs your kindness. As I close, I want to tell you something. And I referred to it 30 minutes ago. The light of God is within you. When you cross through the veil of death, as I have, and you come back, you're given certain gifts. And it took me a while to understand them. But I see the light of God in you. It's right here at the base of your throat. And the light in this room tonight is magnificent. It is simply magnificent. If you could only see through my eyes what I see in you. You are incredible, wonderful people. And you have the ability to do so much more to help your neighbors, to help your friends, to help strangers. I was speaking the other night, and there was a little boy about 9 years old, and I was telling the kids how important it was to be good. And he said, "Mr. Jim, I can be gooder." We can all be gooder. We can all be gooder. We can be the embodiment of Christ on earth when he was with us. And I hope tonight that I've been able to give you a little glimpse of what waits for you. It is stunning in its scope, in its magnificence, in its love. It's sheer love. You are a child of the light. You are a child of the living God. No matter what has happened to you in your life, no matter what affliction has come your way, God loves you, and there will come a time when you will stand in front of him and you will understand everything that happened in your life. And you will be amazed at the love and the justice of God and how often he saved you and you had no idea. And so as I close, I want you to please remember that be kind to each other. Be as loving as you can be in a world where love and kindness is becoming increasingly rare. And remember what I told you, the guardians, the angels said that they were my constant friends. From this night forward, you are all my constant friends. God bless you.
Praise the Lord. Brother Jim, I would like us all just to close our eyes now. And Brother Jim, the presence of the Lord is here, and you just spoke to us in such a powerful way, and I want to surrender my life afresh to Jesus. And would you just lead us in a prayer? Would you just help us here tonight just to rededicate all our lives to his purpose and his plan for us? I think that would be honorable to the Lord at this time.
Thank you, Pastor Mel. Please join me in prayer. Just remain seated. Reach within yourself. Close your eyes. Listen to my voice. Reach within you for the light of God that I see in you. Know that it is perfect. It is beautiful. Know that you have the ability to do mighty things in God's name. And I ask for the peace and serenity of Jesus to descend upon you at this time. For those of you who are suffering from an affliction, may God heal you. For those that are broken in their souls, may God lift you up. May all the young people here remember this night and dedicate their lives to Christ. For those of us who are here who have fewer years ahead of us than we have behind us. Know that the most perfect place possible is waiting for you. And all you have to do to gain entrance is to love God, to be in heaven, to look at that sunless sky where there are no shadows because there's no overhead sun. But neither is there a shadow of evil, a shadow of jealousy, a shadow of pain, a shadow of hate, a shadow of sadness. Perfect love in the arms of Almighty God. In Jesus' holy name, I ask this peace to descend upon you at this moment. Amen.
Thank you so much. We want to give you opportunity here tonight to invest into our brother continuing to share his story wherever he may go. And if the ushers could come at this time and just, how do you want to pass the Brother John? Is that what you want to do here tonight? Yes. You can make checks out to Partnership for Revival, and if whatever you want to do to sow into this ministry, we give you opportunity to do so at this time. And as the baskets are being passed around here, then too. I think if there's any quick questions here, we'll just take a few moments.
Yeah, I really enjoy being asked questions about heaven. Do I know everything? Of course not, but I know a bit. And so for 10 or 15 minutes, if you wish, I'm happy to answer questions. And don't be shy. You're among friends, constant friends. So if you have any questions, I could tell you one of the first questions that I most often get is, did you see my mansion in heaven? Did you see my big house? Let me explain something to you. The Bible says mansion, but guess how that happened? It really should be dwelling place. Think about it. It's a perfect spot. You're a being of light. You don't need a house, and there's no darkness. There are buildings, there are quiet areas you can go to, but how the word mansion ended up, and I've talked to a number of scholars about this, and also it was explained to me, was when the Bible first came to England to be translated from the original languages, the term mansione means dwelling place, but to the English, it looked like mansion, large country house. And that's what got put into the book, and so what have we thought ever since? We get a mansion. Now, I will tell you that I saw golden arches in heaven, but it wasn't McDonald's.
Anyone over here? Yes, Steve.
What happened when you went back? What did your family have to say?
Yeah, and thank you for asking that, but bless your hearts, I was trying to hurry it up because you've been sitting for a long time. And as my grandfather used to say, the mind can only absorb what the rear end can endure. So thank you for sitting for so long. But to answer your question, my wife, what happened was, when you're triaged, even if you're brought in dead, they put you on a respirator and try to see if there's any way and so they shocked me. I still have the burn scars on my chest, no response. Now, interestingly enough, the true sign of death is not heartbeat or lack of heartbeat. The true sign of death is no brain sign. And I had no brain sign for 11 hours. So my wife is a nurse. She's there in the quiet room. The doctors have spoken with her. They said, Mrs. Woodford, your husband's gone. She begged them to leave me on a respirator so that our children were on their way flying back from Western Canada to kiss me goodbye. And he said, and then we would like your permission to pull the plug. And so Lorraine's out in the quiet room. And here's what happened. And I found all this out after. When suddenly the angel, when Jesus held up his hand to me, and I tried to get closer to him, and I was held back by the angels, but I tried to get closer, and he held up his hand as I told you, and then he spoke to me. Jesus spoke to me. And this is what he said, and I think what he wants you to hear. He said, "James, my son, this is not yet your time. Go back and tell your brothers and sisters of the wonders we have shown you." And the instant he said that to me, I began to cry, to plead, to beg, to stay. I just couldn't leave. And I was crying, I was pleading. I actually remember saying, "Please, Jesus, let me stay. I won't be any trouble." I mean, I know it sounds pathetic, but I was desperate. And suddenly 2 angels grabbed me and they're rushing me down this path, and suddenly I'm in desperation to stay, and I wrench my arm free, and I look back over my shoulder and to plead with Jesus one more time, and Jesus had gone. But standing directly in his place was the tall warrior angel. And suddenly he began to grow in size, and he glowed golden. And suddenly he unfurled, this 15-foot tall angel unfurled these massive 12-foot wings on either side, 15 feet tall, 24-foot wingspan. And it was clear that what he was telling me was that the way forward for me was closed. But I remember looking back in his violet eyes, and then for the last time I heard him say, "I'm sorry, James, but you have to go." Like that, I'm in a tunnel again, but it's not beautiful, it's not light. It's dark and wet, and I feel pain. And I shouldn't say this, but you know what? The only thing I can describe it in that dark time, I felt like I was flushed. Wet and cold, you know? And then I began to feel pain. And so what had happened was they were busy in the intensive care that night, and they had put me in another room with the respirator on, but there were 2 other corpses in there waiting to go to the morgue. I don't remember them saying much. But, so the respirator is, wheezing away, and there was this young student nurse going by this room pushing a med cart. And all of a sudden she hears this beep, 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 indicating that I'm breathing on my own. So she opens the door and switches on the light. And that was the instant that I must have come back out of that black tunnel onto the gurney, and I'm bucking convulsively, and I come bolt upright with a sheet over me, screaming through all the tubes in my mouth. That poor little nurse, she screamed, fell down, tipped over the med cart. The 2 nurses at the nursing station come running in through the door. They fell over her, and there they are. And I'm up on the gurney going. And they got a couple of orderlies in to pin me down, and they said to me after, "Your strength was unbelievable. We could barely hold you down." And my eyes were as big as saucers, because suddenly I'm trying to acclimatize from the beauty of heaven to this sterile room full of corpses. And so my wife told me afterward that they ran out and ran in the quiet room where she was with her sisters, and she was on the phone with the funeral home. And right away she thought they were coming to say, "Well, he's suddenly completely gone, he's gone anyway." But she said, "Mrs. Woodford, come quick, come quick, come quick." So Lorraine runs in, and there I am fighting with the orderlies. And so she climbs up on the gurney, and she can't believe it, and she's holding me and kissing me, and my eyes, and finally I focused on her, and then they ripped the trach out of me, and because my pulse was starting to normalize. And I looked at her, and of all the things I could have said to my wife about heaven, this is what I said. Lorraine, I saw Jesus, and Jesus has horses. But here, one final thing you must know. I came back, and I was sick for a few days because I had collapsed lung. But guess what? The Guillain-Barré was completely gone. Hallelujah. I am healed by the love of God. I'm 70 years old and I feel like I'm 21. I mean, it's amazing. And the doctors are amazed. You know, when they discharged me, Steve, the doctor said, Jim, we don't know what to put on here. And I said, for a reason for discharge. And I said, well, just put on Jesus sent him back. He said, well, I can't do that. So my discharge papers, along with my death certificate, reads, spontaneous recovery. The spontaneous miracle of God.
Now, what did the undertaker do to you? You said 3 months after you came back.
So finally, I was in the hospital for a while, but when I got home and I got well enough to walk, I went down to get the mail one day. How many people have you ever met that got a refund on a coffin? There's a check from the funeral home. Be careful, they charge 10% restocking. I should have kept it and advertised it for sale, only used once.
Another question.
But let me tell you something else. My wife really loves me. Do you know how I know that? Man, was that a nice coffin. All nice wood and brass. She really loves me.
Another question. Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with First Corinthians? Okay, it talks about that no eyes have ever seen, the heart hasn't felt, and the ears haven't heard. But then the next verse says the Holy Spirit. I could say it easier in German, but the Holy Spirit touches the deepest things of God, and that's what you experience.
Yeah. Look, I apologize. My biblical knowledge is not good. You have to understand that unlike you, I've done it all backwards. You've led a good life. You've come up studying the Bible in German and in English, and you're living a life according to God, and you're going to die and go to heaven. I did it all backwards. I go to heaven. Now I'm coming back trying to learn the Bible. So I apologize. I think I've heard that verse before. But I mean, thank God He sent people like the Weavers. And I have to take a minute and tell you something, okay? Because Papa Luke is standing right there, or sitting right there. If you think that I came out of that hospital running down the street, Johnny shirt flying in the wind, saying, Jesus is real, I did not. When I finally got home, I was so sad, devastated. And my wife would try to cheer me up because I would look out our window, and Mel's been at my place in Canada. It's a beautiful farm, horse farm, beautiful countryside. But I would look out and I would remember heaven. And so even on a sunny day, I'd look out at the pasture and it looked like everything was covered with a gray film. And I was really sad. And I would have my hand and I would say, I just don't. And I would sit there and I had I borrowed Lorraine's Bible and my sister-in-law's Bible, and I had my laptop open and I was trying to connect all the dots, of Scripture and what I saw so that I could make sense of it. And so much of it seemed to connect. And finally, when I was only home from the hospital a few days, his brother, his son, pastors a church 50 minutes from me, Luke Jr., in a little town called Benton, New Brunswick. Now, I had met Pastor Luke, but only because my daughter rodeoed with his daughters. And I never paid any attention. He's a pastor. What have I got? I got nothing in common with him. But Luke, God bless him in his mercy, came to visit. He heard that I'd passed, and then he heard I was home. And so Luke came up, and I'll never forget it, because other than Lorraine, Luke Weaver Jr. was the first one that I talked to. And so Luke said, just tell me what happened to you. So I did, not as combined together as it is now, because I've had time to process it. But I told Luke, and it took me about 50 minutes, and I remember Luke sitting there looking at me, and I thought, he thinks I'm nuts. And then he said the three words that made all the difference in the world. He looked at me and he said, Jim, I believe you. And a week later, he phoned and invited me to speak to his church about my experience. And I said, Luke, I can't do that. And Lorraine is there listening to the conversation. I said, I can't do that. I don't have any biblical knowledge. I've never grown up in a church. People will think I'm crazy, and I can't do that. And Luke was very gracious. He said, okay, all right. And then Lorraine had a chat with me. Praise God. And suddenly I saw the light. So I called Luke back, and I'll never forget that Sunday. I went to Luke's church, and I was sweating bullets. I have lost engines at 40,000 feet and was less concerned. And I'm sitting there in the front pew with my wife, and I'm trying to think, because it's the only time I'd been in church was for a wedding. And I'm thinking, well, let's see. First of all, they sing for half an hour. And then they'll pick up a collection, and then Luke will preach for about an hour. With a little luck, I'll be out of here in 10 minutes. Luke gets up and says, we have a guest speaker today. Come on up, Jim. Here's the amazing thing that happened. I'll never, ever be able to describe this accurately. But I get up there sweating bullets, and suddenly it was like something came inside of me. And it was though I stepped aside and someone else was speaking, and I began to pour out the story. And I have never experienced anything like that in my life. Someone else was speaking through me. And it was wonderful, that beautiful little church. When I finished, I was in tears. They were crying. They came up and put their arms around me and loved on me and prayed with me and were so gracious. And suddenly I had this surge of happiness. Because you see, why I was so miserable was not only did I long for the glory of heaven, but I wasn't doing what Jesus had commissioned me to do. Go and tell your brothers and sisters. And once I started to do that in Luke Weaver Jr.'s church, the world opened up. Then I get invited down. Mel has me at Grace Chapel. Word spreads. Destiny Publishing in Shippensburg wants to do a book. Sid Roth calls, puts me on the Sid Roth show. Patricia King Ministries puts me on Real Life TV, and suddenly, here I am.
Amen. All praise to Jesus. Well, Jim, let's give the Lord another round of applause here for His life and His love, and all because of Jesus.
There He is.
All because of Jesus.
There He is.
And that's what He's here for. Jim, you're going to go over there to sign the book here, and we invite anyone to. There's a suggested donation of $15 that we have here for the book, and he'll be glad to sign it. And he'll be glad to stay as long as he possibly can.
If any of you want to speak to me privately
later
or you
on,
have a
about
question
15, 20 minutes or
you're
so.
too shy to ask, excuse me, please, I don't pull an Elvis has left the building. I stay till the last prayer is said. So please feel free to wait around, and I'd be happy to speak with you. But God bless you all for coming tonight, and thank you, John and Sally Lapp, for opening up your beautiful
give
home
John
to
and
us.
Sally a lap of praise. Okay. Amen. God bless you. Have a good night.
Hi, sweetie. Thank you. How was that, John?
Lord, that was good.